welcome to InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw. As we speak, Salem firefighters are part of a group of 70 firefighters sent as mutual aid from Oregon to California to fight those horrific Los Angeles wildfires. Those blazes have taken dozens of lives, destroyed over 12,000 structures over a 60 square mile area. Think of that, 60 square miles blackened. Our Salem firefighters lost no time saving homes once they got there. Here to bring us up to speed on what's happening is Salem Fire Chief Dave Gerboth. Dave, thank you for taking the time today to join us.
Thank you for having me here.
Tell us, can you imagine 60 square miles?
Yeah, I think even more than just the size. I've certainly, throughout my career, been on many large fires that have been tremendously larger than that, but it's really the scope of destruction that is the most tragic, that's the most heartbreaking when you see that actually happen.
And even as the winds died down and weren't as bad as they were supposed to be this week, they're supposed to pick up next week, and the danger isn't going away.
It's, unfortunately, especially in Southern California, it is now just a year-round fire season because of how climate has changed. It's a dangerous situation, and it's unfortunate for sure.
I wanted to shout out to our firefighters down there who are still down there fighting, and as I said, it didn't take them long to get into action. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I couldn't be more proud of our Salem firefighters. I mean, I know that they do amazing work every day in the city of Salem, but when the need was there, they answered the call. They drove all the way down to Los Angeles, and on the first shift that they're there, they ended up saving a house. They ran into a house that had a attic fire that was going on. They put it out. They saved that house, and there's a family that's going to be able to go back to a home because of their actions.
That's just remarkable. I was thrilled when I heard that, and that also they actually did arrive. They weren't turned away. There was some misinformation about that, wasn't there?
There was some misinformation. Certainly, when we bring these units outside of state, they do have to go through an inspection process just to make sure that the pieces of equipment are safe to operate. And so they're checking things like tires and brakes and those type of things. The misinformation that was articulated was over emission standards, and that California was checking emission standards, and that just wasn't the fact. And so they did go through about a 15-minute vehicle inspection on the way to Los Angeles, and we had no problems. Our vehicles were well maintained and
passed with flying colors,
yeah,
right?
Correct.
What are they doing? What are they telling you? You're in constant touch with them, are you not?
Yeah, I mean, they are really articulating what we've all seen on the news. The tragedy that is both the Palisades fire and the Eden fire. They are currently assigned to the Palisades fire, which is the one that's getting more publicity probably that we see.
And it's less contained.
But yeah, equally, I mean, they're equally destructive. What they're telling me really is seeing it firsthand it's hard to comprehend the scope of destruction that has happened in that area.
Do they have any idea about how long it's going to take to really contain it and put it out?
Yeah, I think, actually putting them out and containing the fire, probably a couple of weeks when they go through all the hot spots. But to really get to an area where it's even safe is going to take a tremendous amount of time. You have power lines that are down. You have these deep-seated fires that are smoldering. You have sharp edges when you're digging through debris. So utilities that have been compromised. So it really is a long-term recovery. So even to get in is going to take some time, but that recovery process is going to be years.
There's also the idea of not letting people back as much as they want to be going back to their homes, even to see if they're still there. There are real safety considerations. Toxins? What's that?
Yeah, certainly. That's, I know that the authorities there, they want to get people back into their homes. They want to get people that have lost homes to be able to go see, have some closure, and also look for any items they may may have there, but exactly, it needs to be done in a safe way. And so they have teams of utility workers that are fixing power lines. They have teams of firefighters that are putting out hot spots. They have members of engineering that are looking at, are the houses safe to go in. So they just want to make sure that there is certainly a level of safety before people get to go back into those areas.
Of course. And any closer to finding out how these fires actually started?
I know that they have a team. They have a what they call a national response team from alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. It's working closely with local fire investigators on. This is brought in on major incidents, and sometimes these investigations could take months. Sometimes they could take years. But they have the best of the best working on that to ensure that they can find the cause.
Much has been made of the fact that no matter how many people you had fighting this fire, this one was not winnable right from the get-go. And when I heard that, and coming from some authoritative sources, nope, this one really was going to take off running, and no matter what you threw at it, it was not really going to be easily fixed. Separate that out for us.
Sure. Yeah, I think, when you have hurricane force winds that are pushing a fire through an urbanized area, the idea that you're going to stop the fire is impractical, right? However, when we have certain tactics that we use, and when we let the fire go by, it goes by generally very fast. We come right behind the fire, and because of how quickly fire moves sometimes, houses are still there, and we can start going house to house, putting out small fires so they don't get bigger, and we don't have this domino effect of house after house burning. What we saw in Los Angeles, unfortunately, was the water system did not keep up with the need. So not having that ability to actually extinguish the small fires and continued wind really contributed to a disastrous consequence.
And even when they were able to get some of those pumps working again and bring in some help in that area, the reservoir was out of commission.
Yeah, so one thing that has happened, and Oregon has been part of it, is supporting what we call water tenders. Those are, like you see big water trucks,
sure.
And flooding those into that area so they do have water. Unfortunately, that first day or so, they didn't have that, and so we saw the result. But the idea that you can't put out a fire, maybe, but you can absolutely save homes, you can absolutely save lives, you can do great work even as the fire passes, and we're seeing that still. We saw that with our engine company from Salem, where it's 2 days later, but there was a smoldering fire that ends up becoming a larger fire. They're able to see it right away, put it out, save a home, and so having those resources in place and having, obviously a water supply to do that, you can absolutely make a difference.
And you also have some other resources that we often don't even think about. Internet connectivity, the ways you keep in touch with each other, LiDAR. I mean, you have ways of fighting fires now that are greatly helped because of technology. Yeah,
some of the technology advancements have been some of the most helpful to fire suppression. When I started in 1992. I spent several years as a wildland firefighter. I worked for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, now the moniker of CAL FIRE, both in Northern and Southern California. So I had an extensive experience with wildland fires. At that time, we did not have the situational awareness we have now. We would go to fires. We would really, we were up to what we saw on the ground, how we could get what we called field observers or some of our crews in the area to find out where fires were. Sometimes when you're under a blanket of smoke, you can't see very well. Now we have what you mentioned. We have LiDAR. We have aircraft that has forward-looking infrared that can see where the hot spots are. We have all this technology now that is really providing the situational awareness and a common operating picture for all of these responders, so they understand exactly what's happening, where the fire is, and how best to really address those issues.
This is interesting. You fought fires, wildfires, and you have a lot of experience. Could you tell us more about your experience?
Yeah, I started in Northern California, and the area I started in Redding in Northern California, and it ends the Central Valley and then goes up into the foothills and then up into the mountains. So really diverse area where you had some lighter grass fuels on the valley floor that would move into a heavier brush component, and then big timber. And so got to see all those different types of fires, and then eventually I worked in San Diego County for CAL FIRE, where we had really this same fuel model component that you see in Los Angeles. So a different way that fires burn and have to be addressed in different ways.
Go into that a little bit more, because we're talking about the boundary between the urban areas and the wildland areas, and that's a big deal.
Sure, yeah. So we have seen this transition over a number of years where wildland fires were in remote areas. And we've seen this gradually, and unfortunately in the last several years, less gradually, more rapidly, where these fires are now creeping into urbanized areas and causing these destruction that we've never seen before.
And more than just creeping, it's exploding in growth. I understand that in Southern California, about 45% of people live in areas where there's high fire risk.
It is, and you know, over the history, we've built these homes and communities in these areas. It is a complex issue. There's many different reasons why you know, we're seeing what we're seeing today. Certainly, we're seeing a change in weather, and you know, we didn't have drought with Santa Ana's in January. That is not a normal phenomenon, right? And so, you know, we can debate why the weather is changing, whether it's human caused, whether it's cyclical. I don't know, but it is absolutely different than what has happened in years past.
Well, you have certainly not been having the rain that you used to get. That was always a nice mitigating factor, to have rain, at least in the winter. But this winter in Los Angeles, what is it, 1/16 of an inch between October and January?
Yeah, they're having, actually, it's the amount of rain is at record lows since like the 1850s. And so it is not a great situation. I mean, generally, even in Southern California, fire season would usually end in November. And now we're seeing these catastrophic fires happening in January. It's scary and it's concerning.
When people were watching, horrified around the world at how embers could get going and go 2 miles and catch people unawares, this could also be the reason why people maybe didn't take it quite as seriously. They weren't thinking in terms of embers. They were thinking, oh, there's a fire over there. That's another danger with the fuels. What are those fuels? Because, for example, we used to call chaparral greasewood. They're basically made to burn, and a lot of that hasn't been pruned away so that it's added more danger.
Yeah, so what you mentioned, so chaparral, that's the fuel model that's prevalent in Southern California. That's a colloquial term for many different types of vegetation. Often that's chamise is the greasewood that you referred to. It could also be sumac. There's many different types of vegetation that contribute to, and non-native.
What are those?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of non-native species that exist within California, or really anywhere, that have been brought from other parts of the world as ornamentals, or have now become prevalent, that really contribute to that fire growth.
Should we be thinking about firefighting in a new way?
Well, absolutely. I will tell you. So throughout my career, you know, going through being really almost exclusively a wildland firefighter for the first several years of my career, and then working for municipal departments, it was rare that we would see fires in 100,000 acre fire. That was just, you know, there were some historical fires of that size, but we were never seeing that in those years that I worked for CAL FIRE. I think I went to one that was that large. Historically, when we first started keeping records about the size of fires in California. The first large fire that we have records is the Mojita fire, which is in Ventura County in 1932. It's about 220,000 acres. And that was the largest fire in California history until 2003. And so in 2003, in San Diego County, I was working for the San Diego Fire Rescue Department at the time. We had what was deemed the Cedar Fire in October of 2003. That fire became the largest fire in California history at the time, almost 274,000 acres, almost 3,000 structures were lost, and 15 lives were lost. And this became a watershed moment, I think, for not only San Diego and California, but really the nation, because that was a major shift that in 71 years we kept the largest fire, right? And now all of a sudden something changed. Well, you know, at the time we felt that that was a once in a lifetime event, a 100-year event. We were never going to see anything like that again. And then 4 years later, we had the Witch Fire, also in San Diego County, and it was almost identical. 200,000 acres, a couple thousand structures were lost, lives were lost, and now the Cedar Fire, which took 71 years to be the largest fire in California history, is now like the 10th or 11th largest fire. We've had more fires that are just becoming explosive and large and destructive, and unfortunately, it's almost becoming routine.
So again, should we be rethinking how we fight fires?
Well, certainly. So there are many different tactics that we employ on how we fight fires, how we fight wildland and vegetation fires. Certainly, we mentioned technology and understanding where a fire is, knowing that you just can't fight fire in the same way. Since about that 2003 era, and as we move forward, one of the things that I hear on these large fires almost every time is you hear seasoned, experienced firefighters that say, "I've never seen fire burn like that before. I've never seen fire move that quickly before." So we have these slides and this experience on how we fight fire, but it's almost useless because the fire is moving so much more quickly than we ever imagined. It has a fire behavior that we never imagined, and we have to absolutely change our tactics to make sure that certainly we're preserving life and trying to extinguish fires in the best possible way.
Is this just on the West Coast in California and Oregon, Washington, or is this a national issue?
This is absolutely a national issue.
Are firefighters talking about this nationally?
Absolutely. And we've had historic destructive fires well outside the western United States we're traditionally think of. A few years ago in the east, in Tennessee, they had historic destructive fires. Texas, I spent a few weeks in Texas in 2012 when they had Bastrop Fire, which was at the time historic. It destroyed, I think, almost 1,000 homes, never seen before, and now since then there's been even more. So this is not a phenomena that is reserved simply to the western United States. This is unfortunately really across the country.
Is there a national firefighters' perspective on this that's turned into any kind of program?
There are many programs. So there is the National Wildland Coordinating Group, which coordinates wildland fire suppression policies, techniques throughout the United States. So they're bringing all of the organizations and agencies together to make sure that we're all educated and all operating in the same manner.
What about prevention? In other words, constant clearing. Is there any rule or law in Oregon that prevents really more aggressive clearing of fuels?
So we have requirements for clearing, depending on where you live and the distance. I will say that I believe, and I think we've seen the proof, that it's really multifaceted. There is certainly vegetation management, clearing, making sure you have vegetation that's not close to your house, but at the same time also hardening structures, and what we call hardening, and that is preparing those structures for those type of environments. And so what we've seen is traditional construction that had shake shingle roofs, for example.
Oh yeah.
Roofs made of wood, which now seems inconceivable, which was very common even through the 2000s and was a contributor to much of this destruction. When you look at some some of how houses are built. Eaves, when you have openings under eaves, that really gives an opportunity for fire embers and brands that we see so many of that contributes to that fire spread that gets into the eaves. It starts an attic fire. The attic starts to spread. By the time you get to it, you've already lost the home. So making sure that you're protecting those. And then certainly there are windows that have fire-resistant windows and different construction methods that really work in conjunction with fuel mitigations.
But what are you going to do about the speed with which fires are able to just grow exponentially?
Yeah, so there's a couple. One is fuel mitigation projects. There's certainly been an emphasis on mitigating that. You know, one of the theories, and probably even more of a theory, but a truth on something that has contributed to these large growth fires is the fact that we've been suppressing them now for over 100 years, where before the fires would burn naturally, they would burn some of the understory, and then you wouldn't have fire climb up and become these huge devastating fires. And so it would clear out the understory, you'd have a nice clean forest, and these fires were lower intensity. Now that we've been suppressing fires for so long, the forests are becoming choked, and not just forests, but certainly urban areas, choked with all this vegetation. So now when it actually does start a fire, it goes off like a bomb.
All right, this sounds like just about the worst intersection of situations: urban growth and fire suppression.
Well, we're seeing, unfortunately, the result of that.
So there's plenty of blame going around. Where do you think the blame really lies, if any?
I don't know if it's blame or contributing factors. I think we've certainly learning more and more and have now seeing the results of some of whether it's vegetation management policy, whether it's how we're building communities in these high-risk areas. So what we've seen is a lot of changes on how we manage vegetation, a lot of changes on building codes that have changed. I think we're going to obviously see a continuation of that and maybe a change in how we build our communities.
What changes in resources and firefighter training, especially? Firefighter training, tell us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, vegetation fire response for municipal agencies used to be something that maybe only a few people had the experience of, maybe only a few people did, or maybe there were certain people trained that would leave these municipalities to go assist our neighbors in these type of incidents. Now it is absolutely part of foundational training for at least firefighters in Salem, where not only are you a municipal firefighter that is responsible for responding to structure fires and car fires and everything else, but wildland fire suppression is part of our essential job duties, essential training, and a foundation for how we do our jobs.
And how do you get the word out to people? Because you're a firefighter, and people only think about firefighting when there's a need for it, and they don't think of firefighters, I don't think of as firefighters would like to be thought of. How do you get the word out about who you are and connect with the community?
Yeah, I think community education is key. You know, I take very seriously making sure that we connect with the community, that we're present in the community, and that we have a community-driven fire department. And so the ways that we get our message out, certainly we use different channels, whether it's social media channels, in person at neighborhood associations, going to other stakeholder groups throughout the community, holding events, fire prevention events, and we do that throughout the year. Certainly as we get closer to what is traditional fire season, especially in Oregon, we will you'll see an enhancement of those educational activities, and then us being out in the community, educating and trying to have everybody understand the significant threat that all of us are under.
Well, thank you. That's good to know. What do you prioritize in your talks? What do you want the community to perhaps take upon themselves to do more of?
Well, one is certainly preparation, and we talked about fuel management, we talked about hardening a structure, how people keep those combustible materials away from their homes, certainly how those houses are constructed, escape routes, making sure that they understand where they are. There's really three components. One program that we really like to use is Ready, Set, Go. One is ready, understanding that if you're told to evacuate, you understand where the evacuation routes are, you understand your important documents where they are, and you know that if there is a fire, you know the media to listen to and the information where you're going to get that from. Set is when there actually is a fire, and then you make sure you're collecting your important documents, you know your escape route, you're ready to go, and then go. If you are told to evacuate, if you're ordered to evacuate, the best thing to do is evacuate. Get out early, let firefighters come in so that they can do their jobs, they can protect lives, protect property, and be effective. What we saw, certainly, some of the pictures that have come out of those fires in LA was everybody evacuated late or at one time where people actually left their cars and just stopped in the middle of the road to where if you saw, there was some pretty dramatic video where they were using bulldozers to push cars out of the way so you can get fire engines in to actually go suppress the fire. So the best thing to do in those situations is to, if you get an evacuation order, is really to evacuate immediately.
Oh, we have not heard the last on what is the likely death count down there, and people are just reeling from this. When you think about Oregon and what it needs to do, what would you like to see happen? Is there any effort to do something that, for example, gets more firefighters prepared? Do you have a constant supply of people wanting to become firefighters?
Yeah, I think we can find more firefighters, and we do have a great recruitment in Salem. I think it's a great place to live, and it's a great place to work, and I'm fortunate to be here. We have a great fire department and people that really care deeply about this community. So it's not a matter of getting more people here, but it's about funding to really have the people here, right? And so even now, I mean, we're talking, obviously, if you live in Salem, you know, we're talking about budget deficits and even cutting public safety, right? And so how do we prioritize that? Where does the funding come from to ensure that we have the services available during these emergencies?
What other thoughts do you have that people need to know? Really, this is a wake-up call. It just feels like a wake-up call.
It really should be. And although right now we're focusing on Southern California, there needs to be an understanding that that is not the only place that is vulnerable. Oregon, absolutely. In 2018, I spent 2 weeks in Paradise on the Camp Fire, where Paradise was this town was
totally destroyed.
18,000 structures were destroyed, over 18,000, 85 fatalities. And so that was in Northern California and not Southern California, you know, very similar to Oregon as far as weather conditions and fuel types. And then 2024, unfortunately, was a historic year for wildland fires in Oregon. We burned more acres in Oregon in 2024 than ever before. So this is not something that's going away. Really, this is an opportunity for people to understand how serious this is. You know, when I think of Salem, there are definitely areas of the city that are vulnerable to this type of disaster. And so we're doing our best to educate the public and be prepared if that comes.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on InSight, Dave. A real education for all of us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us today on InSight. I'm Wendy Brokaw.